welcome to another episode of Wandering Middle Eastern Teacher. As always, I am Abu Laith. So today we have Mr. James Powers here. First, thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So today we're again going to get into the nitty-gritty of education. So today will be a little bit different. But let's let those answers and the unique experience just come from the mouth of Mr. Powers himself. So first, why did you get into education?
Yeah, well, my mom is a teacher. And so whenever my mom would come home, she would always talk about her students, and she was always so excited to teach. And that excitement was really infectious. Also, just going up through school, I had some really good teachers who made a big positive impact on me. Teachers who were enthusiastic about their subject, who knew their stuff and could teach it well, communicate it well. And then there's also teachers who weren't so good. And those can be equally motivating to want to communicate this better and to help students more than maybe that other teacher did.
Nice. What kind of teacher was your mom?
She was a first grade teacher.
Oh, okay.
And before teaching first grade, she was also a reading specialist. So she had a big passion for helping young students, really little students, learn how to read.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
So next question, what's your experience been in education? What subjects do you teach and what age groups do you teach?
Sure. So I teach middle school, specifically 8th grade right now, but I teach middle school and I teach history. It's a kind of a combination class of history and literature. And so we are learning about these historical events and the background for being able to understand the literature. And so the literature is an opportunity for us to talk about values and how a person ought to live using that literature, and to talk about big ideas, to talk about these complicated things. But in order to understand the literature, you have to know the background it's coming out of. And so I'm also teaching history kind of alongside of it. It's a little bit different, but I've been teaching that for 2 years, and the students take really well to that kind of combination approach.
Yeah. So for a lot of kids, when they hear the word history, they think, oh, that's so boring. It's just a lot of dates. How do you keep them involved and engaged with class?
Yeah, so when we think about what we see on Facebook or what we see on the news, none of that's boring because it's people, and it's people we can relate to. And so one of the things that I really try to emphasize with history especially is to think about the people, to really attach to the people and think these are people that I might know. These are people that's like so-and-so, that's like such and such. So one of the things that we do as we're reading history, the way that our class is kind of structured, we read the book and then we answer questions from the book. And between that, we reiterate, we repeat what was in the book. But as we're repeating it, we're dramatizing it. We're adding the voices in, like, oh, I'm an old man. Or we're adding in these voices, we're adding in these ideas to try to help illustrate and help them imagine what this might have been like. And I think that really helps the students latch onto that. Another way that we try to do that is I try to leave time in each class and then time at the end of a unit, at the end of a chapter, to talk about what they were interested in, what sparked their interest. So this year I have a group of students who are very interested in the daily life in ancient Rome. And so we've taken time to step back and talk about what did an ancient Roman family look like? What did they eat? Just these day-to-day things. That's what they were interested in. Last year I had a group that was very interested in battles and wars. And so we took time out to talk about battles and go into detail, like who were the fighters? How did they fight? These sorts of things. So there's a core set of standards that we have to get through and that we have to teach. But that core set of standards is best taught when the students are most interested. And bringing in those other things to help illustrate that, I think is really helpful for keeping students engaged and making that an enjoyable experience for them.
Yeah, that is a really good point. That just because there are standards does not mean that a teacher loses all creativity. They should, and honestly, teachers must figure out ways to bring in other things, because just talking about facts, meeting all these requirements is kind of boring. But and it really doesn't take that much extra effort to find some of these other ways to keep students, but it pays off in a lot of details.
Absolutely.
So in speaking of that, what are some places that you have found this information? Where have you looked for resources to help you kind of expand the curriculum?
Sure. Part of it in my schooling, in my undergrad, I was studying religion and philosophy. And so some of it is coming from that educational background.
Nice.
And that's kind of a starting point to know where to build off. Our textbook gives a lot of quotes from historical sources. And so I can then take that quote, and my 8th grade students don't know how to do this yet, but I can go find where that quote came from, read up the context on it, and kind of know what the author of the book is trying to do, because sometimes the author of the book, I think, misinterprets the quote. Right. Sometimes I think she might misuse it. And so it's good to go back and research that. And then once you've kind of figured out those primary sources, those baseline sort of things, you can then go on the internet and start searching for different commentaries. Just as a brief guideline on that, I'm looking for things published by universities. .edus and .orgs are generally more helpful than .coms. So looking for people who are published scholars on sources, who are coming from universities, who can back up their statements with primary sources, primary historical texts, or with archaeological data. Those are all helpful. Whenever the more data they're able to back themselves up with, the more reliable that source is. And so I'm coming through and using the internet to help, and then using libraries to verify, and kind of collating all these things. And many times when we've got a special topic that we're talking about that wasn't in the book, I will organize those things into just a 1 or 2 page handout that I can give to the students so they can read it and have it to remember it, and also to hold me accountable to my research in the text as something to base that off of.
Yeah, definitely sounds like a class I would want to be a part of. Before this, when we were talking, you mentioned one of the big lessons that you've learned is on having a structure to class. Can you explain what does that look like in your class, and how has your experience with that changed from when you started teaching to now?
Sure. So a lot of my previous background working with middle schoolers was in a less formal context, and so much of the emphasis is on getting them excited, get them wound up, get them energized and excited for what you're going to do. And so when I first started the year, last year, I kind of resisted wanting to establish a strong classroom order. I wanted to try to change it up and try to defy their expectations to get their minds engaged. That worked well for about 3 weeks. And then as the year goes on, not having that classroom order makes it increasingly hard to draw them in. And so I found that it made a lot more work for myself in the second semester. When it's winter, the students are tired, it's dreary outside. It made it really hard for them to pay attention. And so having that classroom order and that classroom discipline is really helpful and necessary, I think, to keep students' minds engaged and on task. So what that looks like for our class, we start each class with a recitation, because memorization is important. We want them to learn how to memorize. Memorization isn't the only thing. So we want them to memorize something meaningful. So we will take excerpts from, when we're doing literature, we'll take a key passage from the text, or we will take our kings that we're memorizing, and we'll recite those at the beginning of class together as a way to drill that in. That's short, though. That's maybe the first couple of minutes of class. Then we start reading. So we will tackle a piece from our textbook. We really rely on that textbook as our base. So we will read the textbook, and then we have a workbook that has questions. Now, if you don't have a workbook, then it would be on the teacher to then figure out those key questions. And many of those questions are asking just to repeat information from the text to make sure that they were reading carefully and that they understood what they were reading. So, for example, we might read about the Gracchus brothers and their proposed reforms in Rome. And then the question will be, what were the 3 reforms proposed by Caius Gracchus? And we would list that out. So those questions are really helpful. So we have the reading, and we break that up into sections based on those questions, so that they're not trying to read too much at one time. It's digestible pieces. So we'll read, then we'll repeat, we'll retell the story kind of dramatically to help them imagine it, and then we'll answer the question so that we can recall the important details from that story. And then, before we move on to the next section of reading, I'll ask, does anyone have any questions? And we can build off of that. I can lecture a little bit if I think something's really important. I can ask questions to make sure that they really are getting it. They can ask me questions if they're curious. And those are ways to receive that feedback from the students and to break up the reading so that it's not one thing for too long.
Yeah. So, out of curiosity, who is your favorite Roman?
My favorite Roman, I really like Augustus Caesar, the first emperor. There's always something to be said for going first because there's some creativity involved. But one thing that I liked about Augustus Caesar was the recognition that you have to work with people to get things done. Julius Caesar has these big pie-in-the-sky ideas. He wants to get all these things done, but he alienated himself from other people. And with Augustus, there's a person who knows you gotta work with people to get things done.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit more of, I like the underdog, so the story of Spartacus has always stood out, and just his ability to kind of cause massive change and kind of to threaten the entire empire with just a few acts in his slave revolt. So I'm going to end with one last question. So is there one or a few pieces of advice you would give to someone who is just starting out on their teaching journey, or who kind of gets thrown into it and they don't really feel prepared for teaching?
Yeah. I would say probably the first one, that I would give 2 pieces of advice. The first one would be disciplined. Be disciplined in your grading, because if you don't grade right away, it'll pile up. Be disciplined in your classroom structure, because otherwise the students will know. The students will recognize that you're not paying attention, and they won't pay attention. So be disciplined about your classroom structure, and be disciplined to do your work before class, so that you know, kind of anticipate those questions that will come up, and anticipate this is going to be hard, this is going to be easy, and anticipate those things. So I would say be disciplined in preparation and class. Just the discipline is really important. I know, especially because I got hired on 2 weeks before the start of school. I didn't have time to do a whole lot of preparation, and just having that discipline can communicate a confidence in the classroom that you might not personally feel, but that discipline is helpful to at least give that appearance. And the second one is be enthusiastic. Think about what makes you excited about what you're teaching. I know for me, the people are exciting, and the impacts on people, and to compare it to today and what can we learn. Those are things that are really exciting to me. And when I'm excited about the material, it makes it easier for the students to be excited. How can the student be excited if the teacher's not excited?
Right.
It's easy for the teacher to be excited when the student's not excited. But it's almost impossible for the student to get excited if the teacher's not interested in it. So I would say find the things in what you're teaching that make you excited, that make you interested, and be enthusiastic about those. Bring that energy to the classroom. And it's infectious.
Definitely. Yeah, really, really good answer. enthusiasm and discipline helps, especially in the beginning. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Powers, for being part of this interview and with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and stay tuned next time for another interview getting into a different aspect of teaching. So, as always, I'm Abu Laith, and we will see you next time here on Wandering Middle Eastern Teacher. Ma salama. Bye.
Masalama.